When my wife got a gun pulled on her, it wasn't in a dark alley. It was our backyard, and it wasn't a burglar. It was our HOA's security volunteer, yelling about lemons. You'd think the sight of a 62-year-old woman picking fruit in her own backyard wouldn't trigger a full-blown standoff. But you'd be underestimating our HOA. Or more specifically, Karen. Let me back up. We moved into our quiet, gated community in Orange County for the same reasons most people our age do. Peace, clean sidewalks, and the luxury of watching sunsets instead of city traffic. We didn't come here looking for trouble. We planted roses, walked our old Labrador twice a day, and kept to ourselves. My wife Sarah baked for the neighbors. I fixed their sprinklers. We were, dare I say, ideal HOA citizens. Until the lemon tree incident. You see, our yard borders a small, shared green space, a few feet of land technically maintained by the HOA. And right on that line stands a 20-foot lemon tree. It's been there since the 80s, long before the HOA bylaws were rewritten in 2015 to include Section 14B. Harvesting from community flora requires written approval from the board. Yes, that's real. They put that in writing. So when Sarah walked out one morning with her little wire basket, just like always, to pluck a few lemons for pie, she wasn't gardening. According to Karen, our HOA board president, she was committing theft. Grand larceny, if you believe the HOA's emailed incident report. But this time, Karen didn't just file a complaint. She sent Terry, our self-appointed HOA community enforcement volunteer, a guy who looks like he got rejected from mall cop training, to patrol the yard. He'd been itching for action ever since the HOA let him buy a walkie-talkie and a reflective vest. What Terry also had, illegally might I add, was a holstered handgun tucked under his ill-fitting windbreaker. And the moment Sarah reached for that lemon, "Step away from the tree, ma'am." Yes, he drew the gun on my wife for touching a lemon. I heard her scream from the garage. By the time I ran out, there he was, red-faced, shaking, gun halfway raised. Sarah frozen, one hand in the tree, the other holding a lemon like it was contraband. Now, here's the part Terry didn't know. Sarah isn't just anyone. She's a sitting federal judge, and she was already building a case. What started as a ridiculous HOA tantrum over lemons exploded into something much bigger. Surveillance, community smear campaigns, abuse of power, and secret votes rigged to give Karen total control of the board. But what Karen and Terry didn't realize was this. They'd just gone toe-to-toe with a woman who writes case law for a living. And Sarah, she doesn't lose. In the coming chapters, you'll see how Karen weaponized HOA bylaws to terrorize her own neighborhood, how security patrols turned into intimidation tactics, and how one couple, armed with legal knowledge and a whole lot of receipts, took on the system from inside the courtroom. Justice, it turns out, may be slow, but it's wearing heels, carrying a pie, and coming for Karen. Let me start by saying this. It wasn't about the lemons. Not really. That lemon tree, bless its bright yellow heart, was just the first shot fired in a much bigger battle. One Karen had apparently been itching to start for months. All she needed was a reason. And my wife giving free lemon bars to the neighbors? That was insubordination. After the whole gun incident, which yes, we reported to the sheriff's office, more on that later, Sarah and I thought the worst was over. Terry was reprimanded, or so we were told. The HOA board issued a tepid, "We regret the misunderstanding." And for about 48 hours, things were quiet. Then came the fines. We received 3 certified letters in 1 week, each one more ridiculous than the last. 150 for unauthorized harvesting of HOA property, 75 for verbal altercation with a board-appointed representative, and my personal favorite, 200 for lack of community spirit. You read that right. Apparently, lack of community spirit is now a billable offense. Naturally, Sarah responded the way any federal judge would. She read the bylaws. Then she printed them out, highlighted them, and annotated them like a Supreme Court decision. Turns out none of those fines were enforceable, not a single one shamema. But Karen wasn't going to let facts get in the way of her power trip. At the next HOA meeting, Karen unveiled her latest creation, the Compliance Committee, a 3-member task force designed to protect neighborhood standards and harmony. Guess who was appointed chair? Terry. Yes, that Terry. The same man who pointed a gun at my wife was now in charge of peacekeeping. Karen claimed it was community elected, But the vote had been taken over email during a holiday weekend with no public notice. A few neighbors asked questions, but Karen shut them down with her favorite phrase, "That's not up for discussion at this time." That phrase became her weapon. She used it to steamroll every objection, every concern, every tiny whisper of dissent. Within 2 weeks, compliance installed motion-activated cameras on the trees facing the shared green space, including one pointed directly at our kitchen window. The justification? We've had reports of suspicious activity near the lemon tree. They also handed out anonymous HOA-branded door tags that said things like, "You've been noticed, a violation has occurred." No details, no context, just vague threats and passive-aggressive policing. The HOA newsletter, once a cheerful little pamphlet about bake sales and lost cats, turned into a full-on propaganda machine. Karen's monthly column, Community First, started naming names, though not directly. One issue warned about residents who believe they are above the rules, and another encouraged neighbors to report all activity, no matter how minor, to compliance. Your vigilance keeps us safe. We were being watched, not just by cameras, by people. People we'd once invited to dinner. People we'd helped carry groceries. It was chilling. And Sarah, she still hadn't said a word. She was watching. She was documenting. And she was waiting. One afternoon, I came home to find Sarah sitting at the kitchen table, surrounded by paperwork. Not court files, not HOA documents. A spreadsheet. "What's this?" I asked. "It's a record," she said. "Every action taken by Karen or the board that violates HOA bylaws, state law, or federal regulations." She had timestamps. She had scanned letters. She had screenshots of public Facebook posts from board members saying things like, "Certain neighbors are making life harder for all of us." She even had audio recordings from meetings. Because yes, California is a two-party consent state. But guess what? If a meeting is publicly announced, you can record it. She wasn't just building a case. She was building a timeline, a bomb, with Karen's name on it. By month 3, the cracks were showing. One by one, neighbors began pulling us aside in the driveway or at the mailbox, whispering things like, "I didn't vote for Terry. I'm sorry about the cameras. Karen threatened to fine me if I didn't back her." Turns out we weren't the only targets. A family down the street had been fined $500 for putting out Halloween decorations too early. An elderly couple was cited for unauthorized wind chimes. Thus, someone else was told to repaint their mailbox because the shade of beige was too expressive. People were scared, but they were also starting to get angry. Karen must have sensed she was losing control because that's when she made her first real mistake. She tried to evict us. Technically, she couldn't. We own our home. But she claimed that our ongoing legal threats and hostile tone were grounds to suspend our community privileges, including access to the clubhouse, pool, and common areas. We received a letter stating we were no longer in good standing, and our HOA voting rights were being revoked pending a special review. Now this is the part where Sarah finally stood up. She wrote a letter, not a handwritten note, a formal cease and desist citing 5 distinct legal violations from wrongful suspension of privileges to abuse of HOA governance. She CC'd the County Housing Authority, the State Attorney General's office, and the HOA's own insurance carrier. It was a warning shot written in 12-point Times New Roman and that screamed, "Come at me again and I'll dismantle your kingdom one statute at a time." That letter, it stopped Karen dead in her tracks. At least for now, no more fines, no more door tags, no more Terry. But we weren't naive. We knew this wasn't over, not by a long shot, because Karen doesn't retreat. She regroups, and we could already see it in her eyes, that nervous smile she wore at the next HOA meeting, the way she avoided Sarah's gaze, the way she clutched her gavel a little too tightly. She wasn't done. She was planning something. And Sarah, she was ready. Let me tell you something about tyrants. They don't go quietly, they go ugly. And Karen, she went nuclear. After Sarah's cease and desist letter hit, we got a solid week of peace. No fines, no door tags, no camera adjustments. For the first time in months, we actually slept through the night. But if you know HOA drama, and if you're watching this, you probably do, you know that was just the eye of the storm. Because on the 8th day, we got a notice stuck in our mailbox. Not mailed, not certified, just shoved in there like a ransom note. It was from the HOA Compliance Committee. Subject line? Violation of community trust. Official hearing scheduled. Apparently, Karen had called for a community hearing to determine whether Sarah and I posed a threat to the social harmony of Brookstone Estates. That's a direct quote. Let me remind you, this wasn't a court. This wasn't City Hall. This was a folding table set up in the clubhouse, flanked by 3 of Karen's loyalists. And Terry, yes, that Terry, sitting off to the side, arms crossed like a retired WWE referee. We weren't allowed to bring legal counsel. We weren't given an agenda. We were told this was a discussion. But when Sarah asked to record the meeting, Karen slammed her gavel, yes, she had a gavel now, and said, "This is a private internal proceeding. Recording is prohibited." That's when I knew. They weren't just trying to punish us. They were trying to build a case to silence us. Later that week, flyers started showing up on porches, black and white, anonymous, printed on cheap paper. Headlines like, "Who is really behind the Lemon Tree lawsuit? Federal judge or neighborhood bully? Is Brookstone safe anymore?" The flyer included a blurred photo of Sarah, taken without her consent, while she was walking our dog. It accused us of threatening litigation to avoid basic community standards. It said we wanted special privileges, that we endangered volunteers. Terry was suddenly a victim. Karen was a hero protecting our shared values. And we were painted as elitist outsiders trying to tear down the neighborhood. One of the lines even said, "Maybe someone needs to remind them they're not above the rules, no matter what robe she wears in court." Sarah read that one twice, then folded it, then smiled. "They just made it official," she said. "They're scared." Here's what Karen never figured out. Sarah had already filed a formal complaint with the California Department of Consumer Affairs, which oversees HOA conduct. She'd also filed a report with the state bar, citing abuse of legal process and personal harassment. And she wasn't done. She started attending HOA meetings, every single one, not as a resident, as a legal observer. She brought a notepad, she wore glasses, she never raised her voice. And every time Karen tried to move the meeting along too fast, Sarah raised one eyebrow and said, "Could you clarify the procedure you're following?" Neighbors started noticing, and something began to shift. That's when Karen panicked and went too far. At the next meeting, she motioned for an emergency change to the bylaws, allowing the board to suspend voting rights for any resident under disciplinary review. In other words, anyone Karen didn't like. The vote passed because no one knew what it really meant. They just saw the words disciplinary and safety and thought, sure, sounds reasonable. Within 48 hours, Sarah and I got a new notice. As residents under ongoing review, you are hereby ineligible to vote in the upcoming board election. That was the last straw. The next morning, Sarah did something even I didn't expect. She sat down at her laptop, opened a blank document, and started typing. Not a motion, not a memo, a letter to the editor. It ran in the Orange County Register the following Sunday. When HOA power goes too far, a judge's perspective. She didn't name names. She didn't have to. She laid out every abuse, every violation, every intimidation tactic. She explained in plain English how HOA boards sometimes evolve from community caretakers to miniature tyrannies, run by people who confuse authority with ownership. She cited laws, she cited case history, and she did it all while reminding people that HOA rules are not above constitutional rights. The article blew up. Within 2 days, she was invited to speak on a local radio show. Within a week, state reps were contacting her about pending HOA legislation. Suddenly, Karen wasn't just dealing with an angry neighbor. She was dealing with a public figure. And right on cue came Karen's final play. She tried to evict our lemon tree. That's right. She filed a motion to have the lemon tree cut down, citing invasive root risk and safety hazards to children. Never mind that no children had ever been hurt by a lemon tree in the history of citrus. We had 72 hours to respond. Sarah did, in court, with a temporary injunction, and a petition signed by 34 neighbors. Turns out we weren't the only ones fed up. People were starting to talk, to compare notes, to ask, wait, you got fined for wind chimes too? Karen didn't show up to the next HOA meeting. Terry resigned from compliance. 2 board members submitted letters of concern. And Sarah? She filed a formal motion with the Superior Court requesting a judicial review of the HOA's voting policies, enforcement actions, impossible civil rights violations. This wasn't a lemon feud anymore. It was a legal crusade. And Karen's empire, it was cracking. Let me paint you a picture. It's 6:45 p.m. on a warm Thursday evening, the kind where the breeze smells like cut grass and you can hear someone's wind chimes 3 houses down. Inside the Brookstone Estates clubhouse, 50 folding chairs are packed wall to wall. It's the HOA annual election night, but it feels more like Judgment Day. Karen sits at the front, chin high, shoulders tight. Her little HOA gavel sits beside her like a loaded weapon. Terry's nowhere to be seen. The rest of the board looks like they'd rather be anywhere else. Sarah sits near the back, calm, poised, holding a 3-inch binder that's been slowly growing over the past 6 months, like a legal time bomb just waiting to detonate. And me? I'm standing near the coffee table, watching it all unfold. Because tonight the neighborhood isn't just voting for a new board, they're voting on Karen. It started earlier that month when Sarah's letter in the Orange County Register started making rounds. Not just online, but in actual print, clipped and taped to mailboxes, passed out at dog parks, even posted inside the clubhouse. People finally had a name to put to their frustration. They realized they weren't alone. Suddenly, everyone had a story. Someone got fined $300 for planting daisies that were too vibrant. Another neighbor was cited for graffiti, a chalk drawing her grandkids made on the sidewalk. One poor guy got threatened with a lien over a Halloween skeleton left up one day too long. It stopped being about rules. It became about fear. And once that spell broke, the community did something no one expected. They organized. 1 week before the election, a petition began circulating, calling for a vote of no confidence in Karen as board president. It needed 40 signatures to force a vote. It got 76. Some folks even brought cookies and lemonade door to door, explaining why it was time for a change. Others printed homemade signs. Citrus isn't a crime. Dissent isn't disorder. No more Karen. The clubhouse started to feel less like a gated community HQ and more like a revolution in suburbia. And Karen, she tried to fight it the only way she knew how. Emails, threats, procedural roadblocks. But it was too late. The people weren't scared anymore. Back in the clubhouse, the election meeting begins. Karen calls it to order with that little gavel, but her voice cracks a bit. She tries to move quickly, skipping straight to the agenda, but someone in the crowd, bless her, raises a hand. Point of order, the neighbor says. Before we move to elections, we'd like to address the no confidence petition. Karen freezes. That's not on the agenda, she snaps. It is now, someone else says. Seconded, comes another voice. Third, echoes a retired Marine from the front row. Democracy is a beautiful thing. Karen tries to object, citing procedural codes. But this time Sarah stands up. Actually, what she says, your own bylaws state that if over 50% of attending members motion to vote on leadership, the board must comply. She smiles politely. Karen doesn't. The HOA secretary, who looks like he's aged 10 years in 3 months, quietly begins passing out printed ballots. There's murmuring, side eyes, whispered comments like, I can't believe we're doing this, and about damn time. The votes are collected in a clear acrylic box. No one speaks. You can hear someone stirring their coffee. Finally, the count begins. It takes 4 minutes. 4 silent, tension-filled minutes. When it's done, the secretary stands. The community has voted to remove Karen Myers as board president, 61-12. The room erupts. Some clap. Some just exhale for the first time in months. And Karen, she sits perfectly still, face white, hands trembling. Her gavel falls to the floor with a soft clink. Now at this point, Karen could have left with what little dignity she had left. She could have walked out quietly and claimed burnout, or stress, or personal reasons. But no, she snapped. This is a setup, she shouted. I've given everything to this community. You think you'll survive without rules? She accused people of conspiring against her. She pointed fingers. She insulted Sarah directly. And that's when Sarah stepped forward, binder in hand, calm as a lake in winter. Karen, she said, voice clear, since you're speaking on the record, I think the community deserves to hear what you've actually done in the name of rules. She opened the binder and began reading. Unauthorized surveillance installations, misappropriation of HOA funds, including $2,000 spent on office furniture, aka her new patio set, false IHations without board approval, illegal procedural changes, and the big one, threatening residents with enforcement actions outside the scope of HOA authority. Gasps. Lots of them. One neighbor even dropped her reusable water bottle. As Sarah laid out the facts with evidence, Karen's defiance melted into desperation. She tried to shout over her. Then she begged. Then she cried. But the room didn't move. This wasn't a witch hunt. It was a reckoning. And she'd brought it all on herself. By the end, Karen grabbed her purse, stumbled to her feet, and stormed out the front doors. No applause, just silence. And the sound of someone, probably Terry, peeling out of the parking lot 10 seconds later. In the weeks that followed, things changed. Fast. A new board was elected. The cameras came down. Fines were reevaluated. And a new bylaw was introduced. No HOA officer shall serve more than 2 consecutive terms. Neighbors who hadn't spoken in months were suddenly waving again. Yard sales popped up. Laughter returned to the walking trails. And the lemon tree, still standing, taller than ever, bearing fruit and peace. Last week, Sarah hosted a small backyard get-together. Nothing fancy, just coffee, folding chairs, and her famous lemon bars. People brought cookies. Someone brought a Bluetooth speaker. The dog slept in the sun. As we were cleaning up, a neighbor pulled me aside and said, "I've lived here for 22 years. This is the first time it's felt like home." I looked over at Sarah, laughing with 2 new board members. Both women, both sharp, both learning fast. And I thought, yeah, this is how it should be. 1. Power is borrowed and can be revoked. Karen thought the HOA board made her a queen. But what she forgot is, she worked for us. That gavel, just plastic. Those rules, just guidelines, until they were abused. And the community, not sheep, not children, not powerless. The moment people realized that, Karen's reign was over in a matter of days. So here's a free tip for every HOA board out there. If you have to rule by fear, you're already losing. One of the wildest things about this whole affair is that most of Karen's antics, they were technically within the bylaws at first. Weaponized technicalities, selective enforcement, vague spirit of the rules nonsense. But what she didn't count on was this. We read the bylaws too. Sarah read them like she reads federal law, line by line, loophole by loophole. HOAs rely on people not pushing back, not asking questions, not digging deeper. But the moment someone does, the house of cards starts to shake. Karen always said she wanted to preserve community standards, but really she just wanted control. She didn't care about flowers, noise levels, or safety. She cared about being in charge. She confused order with obedience. She confused feedback with disrespect. And the worst part, she convinced a few people to go along with it, out of fear or habit or exhaustion. But here's the thing. Real community isn't about control. It's about trust. About neighbors helping each other paint fences, watching each other's junks, baking lemon bars for no reason at all. No amount of bylaws can fake that. Sarah didn't yell. She didn't storm into meetings with a megaphone. She didn't post angry rants online. She showed up. She listened. She wrote things down. And when the moment came, she moved quietly, legally, and effectively. That's what real power looks like. So, to everyone watching this, have you ever had a run-in with a power-hungry HOA? Has a Karen in your neighborhood ever crossed the line? What would you have done in our shoes? Drop your stories in the comments. We read every single one, and trust me, this channel lives for juicy HOA drama. And hey, if you enjoyed this saga and want more stories like it, don't forget to like the video, subscribe for future episodes, and hit that bell so you'll know when Karen files her appeal. Because, oh yes, that is coming. Thanks for watching. Stay neighborly, and remember, citrus isn't a crime.